Please join me as we share our chalice lighting words. They're found in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
And happy Earth Day. It is so fine to be part of this creation. Peeping again, serenading us to sleep, these maples behind our sanctuary are growing roots with every drop of rain. It is so fine to be here with you all. And I'd like to pause for a moment and give thanks for all of our ancestors, of our species and of every species, that we may all be here to join in creation, and how humbling that we too may one day become ancestors, beloved ancestors. Our dear little ones are passing out seeds in packets, and these seeds, just like you, have a story. And these seeds, just like you, have ancestors. And these seeds, just like you, may become ancestors one day. They'll become ancestors when you sow them, when you save their seeds, and when you share those seeds with all of creation. It is so fine to be with you this morning, friends. Welcome to our celebration of life. Happy spring. It is so good to be together again.
Thank you.
The sycamore. In the place that is my own place, whose earth I am shaped in and must bear, there is an old tree growing, a great sycamore that is a wondrous healer of itself. Fences tied to it, nails driven into it, hacks and whittles cut in, lightning has burned it. There is no year it has flourished in that has not harmed it. There is a hollow in it that is death, though it brims whitely at the lips of that darkness. Over all of its scars have come the seamless white of its bark. It bears these gnarls of its history healed. It has risen to a strange perfection in the warp and bending of its long growth. It has gathered all accidents into its purpose. It has become the intention and the radiance of its own dark fate. It is a fact, sublime and unassailable. In all the country, there is no other tree quite like it. I recognize in this sycamore a principle, an indwelling, and greater I would be ruled by this same indwelling. I see that it stands in its place, that it feeds in this place, is fed upon. It is native and maker. Wendell Berry.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. I'm Charlotte, I guess you already know. And I'd like to continue talking about the theme of creation this morning. We've been thinking about it all month and touched upon it again this morning with Petra's gift of fruition seeds and the beautiful meditation by Wendell Berry. April's theme of creation is such a big topic, it's been difficult for me to figure out how exactly to approach it. I read recently that we each have about 60,000 thoughts a day. I must admit, for the last couple of weeks, a majority of those, for me, have been about creation. To get started, I'd like to invite you to go back in time with me to a childhood. It's many more years, Carrie, than yours, I can tell you. It's almost like if you were telling a story to your grandchildren, you would say, in the olden days. So until the age of 12, I lived in the country outside of Eldred, PA, at the end of a dirt road. It was a childhood paradise for my two brothers and me. We had only two neighbors, the Yoses, who lived at the end of the road, and the Clydes, who were the last house on the other side just before ours. Mr. Yos walked by our house every afternoon carrying his metal lunchbox. Sometimes he mumbled hello, but mostly he nodded at us as we waved from the porch where we were playing chairs, or my brother was nursing baby skunks, or rolling dried corn silk in newspaper and teaching us how to smoke it. Butch Clyde was about my age and had a pony. We spent many summer afternoons together, the two of us riding that pony bareback all over the place, up through the hills. We even created a circus act and invited our families to watch us do tricks on that pony, daring tricks like riding facing backwards at a trot and other amazing feats. There was also precious time alone in nature, something all too rare for today's children. I remember my very first existential thought, kicking stones down that dirt road on a hot summer day. I must have been 10 or 11 when I asked myself, why am I here? I even remember the answer I gave myself, to learn. It seemed to make sense at the time, still does. Then at 12, we moved to the little town of Portville, just across the New York border, where my mother taught school, and I read Zane Grey books until Miss Keene, the librarian, told me I really ought to try some other thing than horse books. Portville was very small. It had only Main Street and 3 streets off of Main Street. There was Maple, Temple, and Brooklyn. We lived on Brooklyn Street. Sometimes we drove into Olean, 6 miles north, for shopping, or in the summer, swimming in the public pool. I think the furthest away my family probably ever went was to Lake Erie, maybe 100 miles away for a family reunion. The reason I go into this geographic detail is to explain that my life was limited to a very small landscape, not at all like today's children who travel the world in airplanes to different countries and cultures before the age of 6. Fast forward to my senior year of high school and my senior thesis. This was a research paper and a requirement for graduation. Our first task was to meet with our English teacher, Mrs. Bird, to discuss the topic of our paper. My conference went something like this. So Shoddy. Shoddy was my childhood nickname, the best version of my little brother's version of Charlotte. Shoddy. So Shoddy, have you decided what you're going to write about? I'd given it a lot of thought and knew exactly what I wanted to write about and said, yes, I have. And she said, what is it? In a kindly manner. Life, I answered. Life? She looked puzzled for a moment and said, don't you think that topic is a bit big for a 20-page paper? Maybe you should narrow it down a bit. I don't remember what I did write about that senior year. I must have thought of something because I did graduate. I only remember now how naive I was at 17 to think I could write about life. Well, that's kind of how I felt when Kathy asked me last month if I would like to give a sermon in April on creation. I agreed, and then on the ride home from church thought of Mrs. Bird's cautionary question, don't you think that topic is a bit big for, in this case, 20 minutes? Let's see, creation started with the Big Bang, 13.7 billion years ago. The Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago. Humans have been around on the planet for maybe 200,000 years ago. 20 minutes? I had learned my lesson. And I immediately set about trying to narrow down the subject to something more manageable. Not too sure how to do that. I started asking friends of mine who gave sermons how they would tackle the theme of creation. First was my longtime friend, Sister Barbara Moore, who teaches preaching at Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School. She's even published a book of her best sermons. Her answer was immediate. I would use Laudato Si, she said. Laudato what? I asked. Laudato Si. It's the Pope's encyclical on the environment. It's a letter written not to Catholics, but to all of humanity about the environment and how we must take care of the earth. I thought that was a great idea, given that we have so many environmental activists at UUCC. So I rushed home to order it on Amazon. While waiting for it to arrive, I continued to search for approaches to creation, which is pretty creative, I think. I next asked my friend Rachel McGuire, who is a Baptist preacher, how she would approach the topic. We were having our monthly Indian lunch together, and she said, oh my gosh, the whole first chapter of my doctoral thesis is on creation. Would you like to read it? It's a little long, 67 pages. As I was wading through Rachel's chapter, the 177-page Laudato Si arrived. I was reading both of these when I happened to meet Sarah Gillespie at a Bernie Sanders meeting at the Skylark Lounge in Rochester a few days later. I asked her, of course, how she would approach a sermon on creation. She recommended reading a certain Episcopalian priest book which had an interesting take on Adam and Eve. Her husband, also Adam, wrote it down on a scrap of paper for me, which unfortunately I soon lost. But by then I was already overwhelmed by my thinking and reading on this huge topic. Turns out there are a zillion ways to approach the topic of creation, or any other topic for that matter, which is part of my message, which I'm getting to, I promise. I was in the middle of reading Laudato Si Mi Signor, Praise be to you, my Lord, in which St. Francis of Assisi reminds us that our common home is like a sister with whom we share our life, and a beautiful mother who opens her arms to embrace us. And Rachel's chapter, explaining the correlation between biblical creation theology and the military-industrial complex, when I got to wondering if I should write about creation as a nature theme, or should I write about it from the artist's point of view? How do creative people create their creations? So I asked an artist friend of mine how she creates her art. Karen, who's actually a friend of my daughter's living in LA, makes her living editing videos out of her home. But every day she takes her dog for a walk and has started doing sidewalk art, which she then photographs and is actually turning into a book. She creates all kinds of faces using found objects, whatever she finds along the way. Little stones, sticks, twigs, maybe a little piece of string or a berry, or some piece of trash thrown away. One of them's an old banana peel. She places them on a background that catches her eye. Could be a stain on a sidewalk, crack, or some moss. And then she starts creating a face. She shares these faces on Instagram, #FoundFacesInPlaces. These faces express all kinds of different personalities and emotions. When I asked her to explain her creative process, she said, it starts when I react to something. It could be an object, a shape, a color, an idea. When something captures my attention, I respond, and it starts a creative process, which continues building until something new has been created and completed. It reminded me of the art project our Soul Matters group had done a few weeks earlier at Reverend Karen's house. After a potluck lunch and a tour of her amazing house, which is built inside a barn, we went out onto the deck, which overlooks luscious green horse paddocks surrounded with white fences. In the distance were trees. In the foreground, 2 beautiful horses. On the floor were assembled all kinds of art materials: brushes, oils, pastels, markers, tubes of paint, cans of paint, and a large 6-foot by 6-foot pressed board with an abstract blue design in the center, which Karen had painted on to get us started. Each of us had 1 minute to add something to the board. Any color, any design, no rules. Karen and Edgar are trained artists, so they were happy. The rest of us were a little anxious. Don't expect too much from me, I'm not too creative, someone said. Forget it, I'm not at all creative, someone else said. I was thinking the same thing. But soon we were all laughing and delighted with our progress. As we kept taking turns going around the circle, the board grew into a colorful work of communal art. Each of us was pleased with our own contributions and grateful for the others' creativity. What we all noticed was there was no planning ahead. You didn't know what to do until it was your turn again, because each person changed the dynamics with everything he or she had just added. It was like a living color organism coming to life. Well, as I continued to mull over these various approaches to creation, I realized that every time I encountered a new person or thought, a new direction ensued. And I began to discern a pattern. When 2 or more things bump into each other, a new creation occurs. In fact, I began to think that creation is the inevitable result of things bumping into each other. I was thinking of titling this "When Things Go Bump," but I didn't. Then I had another thought. Creation may have started with the Big Bang, but it didn't end there. It is an ongoing dynamic process that continues to expand and create. The first element, hydrogen, spun off carbon, which spun off oxygen and then calcium, and those first 4 elements kept bumping into each other and recombining into new and ever more complex creations. As Elizabeth Johnson writes in Michael Dowd's book, Thank God for Evolution, the world is almost mind-numbingly dynamic. Out of the Big Bang came the stars, out of stardust came the earth, out of earth came single-celled creatures, out of the evolutionary life and death of these creatures came human beings with consciousness and freedom that concentrates the self-transcendence of matter itself. Human beings are the universe become conscious of itself. Or as physicist Brian Swim says, Earth, once a molten, now sings opera. Or you take a great cloud of hydrogen gas, leave it alone, and it's rose bushes, giraffes, and human beings. So, we are human beings. The universe become conscious of itself. And the question is not, are we creative? Clearly, we are a part of a dynamic, conscious creation machine. That is our essence, our very nature. The question becomes, what are we going to create next? Something positive? Something negative? Something purposeful? Something random? Do we have any control over the matter? Sometimes I wondered about me in this process. I believe we do. Although most of us are not master creators yet, like Moses, who parted the Red Sea, or Jesus, who walked on water, or like St. Francis, who could speak with animals, or other great ones throughout history, we are here to learn and are responsible for our own growth towards that goal of master creator. How can we do that? For starters, we can nurture qualities like curiosity, open-mindedness, the courage to step out of habitual patterns of response, and try something new. We can look to the lives and teachings of the master creators of various artistic, spiritual, and scientific traditions for inspiration. We can remain mindful of our own thoughts, words, and actions as creative acts with consequences, not just for ourselves, but for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. As we walk through this beautiful creation and interact with each other and the natural world around us, we are creating, and not just material things, but also smiles, laughter, hope, beauty, compassion, kindness, understanding, sympathy, love, peace, joy, and praise for life itself. Laudato si, mi Signor. Praise be to you, Lord of creation. I'd like to close now with a Sufi teaching story I heard a couple of weeks ago at a talk given by Thomas More, who wrote the best-selling book, Care of the Soul. The story, in its own way, was also about praise for life itself. It went something like this. Nasruddin was a famous Sufi teacher who loved to tell stories. And of course, there was always a moral in the story somewhere. One day, he was sitting in one of his favorite cafes drinking tea with a couple of his good friends. And the conversation turned to death. They imagined themselves in the future lying dead in their casket and wondered what final words would be spoken over their corpses. The first man said, "When people stand at my casket looking down at my dead body, I hope they say, he was a wise man. He was such an intelligent, well-educated man. The world is certainly a better place because he lived in it." The second man said, "When people stand at my casket looking down at my dead body, I hope their last words are, he was a loving man with such an open heart. Everyone who knew him felt loved and blessed by his very presence." The two men waited for their teacher's words. Finally, Nasruddin said, "When people stand at my casket looking down at my dead body, I hope their last words are, 'Look, he's moving.'" To be alive, conscious, and human is to be the sons and daughters of a universe that is ever evolving, heading towards a destination each one of us is helping to create every day, every hour, every moment. Praise be to the journey and to all creation. Amen.
Yes, take someone's hand so that everyone has a hand to hold. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go and enjoy creation.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.